Hey, seventh grade. So our learning target for today is that I can solve equations with decimals. You should be on page 29. So everything we're going to do is on page 29 today. So our steps for solving in today's work is that first we're going to do is we are going to stop, chop, chop. Now you know that we only stop, chop, chop if necessary, which means if we have subtraction. So go ahead and write that down. Stop, chop, chop. You can abbreviate if you want. SCC is totally fine with me. And we're just stop, chop, chopping if necessary. Okay, crew, after we do that, we will simplify if needed. So simplify if needed, that means that we will use combined like terms. Go ahead and write that down, guys. Here we go. So we'll simplify if needed, which we will combine like terms if necessary. So if you have multiple terms on the same side, so for example, if you have a couple x's, you would combine those if necessary. Okay, group, at that point, then we'll use the inverse operations, which we call the hand method in my class, to solve. Hand method. So we stop, chop, chop, we simplify, hand method kicks in, and then of course we want to make sure that we check our work, make sure everything is good to go. So nice solid check there. Okay, so we just have two problems today. Everything we do today is with decimals, so you're really going to want a calculator. If you haven't picked up a calculator, you want to go ahead and do that right now before we move on. All right, let's go ahead and solve this first problem. So we do have a hand method question coming out of this. We do have some decimals in here, so we're going to draw a vertical line. And in this problem, I'm going to stop, chop, chop because it's subtraction. So step one is done. Simplify if needed, which means if you have more than one r, you should combine it, or if you have more than one number on the same side of the equation, we should combine. But that's not happening in this problem. So the hand method is going to kick in. So we're done with step two as well, hand method. We take our hand and cover the variable r. Anything next to the r has got to go. But in this problem, we have a bunch of things. We have a divide by 0.35 as well as a plus negative 9.01. So the thing furthest away from the r has to leave first. So I'm actually going to take this box and make it pretty big. There we go. And that's going to be a giant hand right there. That plus negative $9.01 is going to have to leave. Closest sign with. The closest sign to the negative 9.01 is negative. So we're going to ignore this sign. Opposite of negative is positive $9.01. Copy paste. Okay, group. We have a rule that says if we haven't used it, we drag it down. So we're going to go ahead and drag this down. That becomes r. Divide by 0.35. That's 0. Equals. Go ahead and write that. R. Divide by 0.35. If we haven't used it, drag it down. And on the right-hand side, we have negative 16.2 plus $9.01. If you want to use your calculator, feel free to do that. Some of you like to do it by hand anyway, just to make sure. But that's negative $7.19. All right, so we still have hand method here. We're going to take our hand and cover just the variable r now. So I'm going to shrink this a little bit because it's kind of big. Whoops, there we go. So we're going to take our hand and cover just the variable r. Our job is to get rid of anything by my hand. So we have this divide by 0.35. So we're going to multiply nice and high to get rid of it. Multiply nice and high. Copy, paste. Multiply on the other side. Go ahead and do that. There we go, guys. We're going to go ahead and cancel those terms. That gives me 1r equals. On the right-hand side, we have negative 7.19 multiplied by 0.35. When we multiply those, you can go ahead and use your calculator on that. You get it negative 2.52 when rounded to the nearest hundredth. Go ahead and chop that off like it's a money problem. Becomes negative 2.52. We'd round that last digit. So there is our answer there. R is equal to negative 2.52. Notice I put that 1 into a box. We could divide by 1, copy, paste. But dividing by 1 doesn't change the problem at all because of the identity property. There's our first problem. It's a hand method with decimals. So really there isn't any difference in solving hand method with decimals. It's just you're probably a little more dependent on your calculator to survive. Okay, let's try this one. So hand method we have going on over here. So we find our variable r. We cover, or actually variable is x this time. We cover the variable. But now we have two things going on. We have a multiply by negative 4.8 and we have an add 6.4. The furthest thing away goes first. So I'm going to cover all of this with my hand and get rid of the plus 6.4. To get rid of that, I subtract 6.4, copy, paste. Go ahead and write that. Plus or minus 6.4, copy, paste. All right, crew. If we haven't used it, I drag it down. So that was that, my hand was covering that, or that box was representing my hand, big stop sign there. Plus 6.4 minus 6.4 is 0. That should happen every time. And on the right-hand side, you probably want to put that in your calculator. You have negative 8.48 minus 6.4. Negative 8.48 minus 6.4 gives us negative 14.88. Okay. The question is the variable x alone? Because if it's alone, then we've solved the problem. But the problem, it's not alone yet. There's this multiply by negative 4.8 that's kind of stuck to it. All right, so we're going to cover the variable x, shrink that down a little bit. There's my hand. The operation between those is multiplication. So to get rid of it, we would divide by negative 4.8. Copy, paste. All right, guys, so here we go. If I haven't used it, I drag it down. Well, the variable x has not been used yet, so we're dragging that down. We have a 1x, and on the right-hand side, we have negative 14.88 divided by negative 4.8. Gives me 3.1. It says to the round to the nearest hundredth, so I guess we better put a 0 as a placeholder because that's tenths hundredths. And we could divide by 1, copy, paste on this step, but that's not necessary. We can just go ahead and say our answer is 3.10 if we round to the nearest hundredth. I added a 0 in the hundredths place. So it's really, that's just our hand method with decimals. So I'm only going to do 2 example problems there. You have plenty to practice in your homework. So your summary questions for today would really be, your statements would be, make sure that you round long decimals to the nearest hundredths. So keep in mind that we have tenths, hundredths. There's our hundredths place. Cut it off as if it's a money problem. Okay, and then the check will not always be exact if it's rounded. So we go ahead and plug it back in and check. And I didn't do that in those steps up there, but just making sure that you're correct. So what I mean by that is, if you go to plug this negative 2.54 back in, let's go ahead and highlight the answer. And I plug it back in to the equation and type that in. It's not going to come out perfect because we rounded negative 2.52. So just a little note for you on that when we plug back in to check. All right, guys, and our last summary for today is that you should maybe use squigglies for approximated answers and use equals for exact answers. We'll go back up and talk about that as well. Go ahead and write that down, and then we'll talk about what that means. Okay, so what this means is, when we solved this problem, we had to round the answer. This became rounded. The minute that we round an answer, it's not exactly the answer anymore. So you should use these approximately equal to whenever it's rounded, because you're kind of changing the exactness then. This one was exactly 3.1. I just added a placeholder, so this one would remain equal to, because I did not round anything. I just added a placeholder. So just FYI on that. I won't be super picky about that in 7th grade. That's more of an 8th grade thing that we bring into play, but we can also start practicing that skill in 7th. Okay, crew, so your homework for tonight is to do the rest of page 29 and all of page 30. Have a fabulous night. Page 29 bottom and 30 for homework tonight. See you 7th grade.